When Amara discovered her billionaire husband's betrayal, she didn't cry, didn't beg. She threw the most extravagant divorce party Manhattan had ever seen and destroyed everything. Amara Brooks stood in the middle of the Plaza Hotel lobby. Her black silk gown sparkled under the chandelier. She smiled, raising a glass of champagne. Around her, whispers rose. Margaret Prescott's face went pale, her eyes twitching. Beside her, Ethan's hand shook. His glass slipped and shattered on the marble floor. Guests lifted their phones, cameras flashing non-stop. Amid the stunned stares, Amara drew a deep breath. No more pain, no more resentment. Only calm, only pride. 8 years ago, Margaret had said, "People like you will never belong here." Now, it was her family that had no place left. Amara Brooks sat quietly in her penthouse on the 42nd floor, eyes gazing down at the vast green stretch of Central Park. New York morning light poured through the large windows, casting golden shadows across the marble floor. Next to her, a dining table draped in white linen held a vase of vivid purple orchids. On paper, she had everything. 34, owner of an interior design firm with clients all along the East Coast. Wife of Ethan Prescott, CEO of a $3 billion tech corporation. They had a private jet, a yacht docked in Florida, a villa in Italy. From the outside, it looked like a modern fairy tale. A black woman stepping into the white elite, living the lavish life so many dreamed of. Amara closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Her lips curved slightly, but somewhere deep inside, something had never been touched. Amara met Ethan Prescott at a charity auction in Soho. That night, she wore a red off-shoulder dress, holding a glass of wine, studying the paintings. Ethan came over, his eyes lighting up when he saw her smile. They made small talk. About art, travel, the city. The way he looked at her made Amara feel like she stood out in the crowded room, as if she was the only one who existed. After the auction, Ethan invited her to dinner, a tiny Italian restaurant on a street corner, glowing candlelight, soft jazz playing. They talked non-stop, laughed often. Even a light touch on the table made her heart race. Amara thought she'd found someone different from all the others. A man who could see through everything on the surface, right to who she truly was. The first time Amara met Margaret Prescott was over afternoon tea at Margaret's house in Boston. A large sitting room, floral wallpaper, dark velvet chairs. On the table, fine porcelain cups from England. Margaret emerged from the hallway in a fitted gray-blue dress, gold glittering on her wrist. Her eyes drifted over Amara, lingering on her brown skin before she finally offered a small smile. "Oh, what a lovely choice, Ethan." "She must be thrilled," Margaret said, voice airy as a breeze, but every word cut deep. Amara stiffened, forcing a polite smile. In her hand, the teacup trembled slightly, the tea inside rippling. Ethan simply squeezed her shoulder, smiling along with his mother. That was the moment Amara understood. To step into this world, she would always have to prove she was worthy, even if it was just over afternoon tea. Amara remembered clearly the first time she set foot in the Prescott estate. A grand old house in gray and white, tall roof, solid stone pillars. Inside, a wide foyer with red carpet, the faint scent of aged oak. Dinner was served at a long table draped in lace, 2 rows of chairs lined up precisely. Yellow light made the silverware gleam cold. Margaret raised her wine glass and began telling stories about her ancestors on the Mayflower, how they stepped onto American soil and built their dream. She laughed lightly, eyes flicking over to Amara. Just a fleeting glance, but enough to make Amara feel scrutinized under a magnifying glass. Under the table, Amara's hand tightened. Her mind churned. Surrounded by wood-paneled walls and oil portraits of ancestors, she wondered if she truly belonged here, or was merely a temporary guest. On her wedding day, Amara wore a long white gown that spilled over the marble steps. White roses formed an arch. Violins played across the garden. Ethan looked at her, eyes shining. When she spoke her vows, Amara couldn't hold back tears. In that moment, she believed she had broken every barrier. Believed love was big enough to overcome skin color, the Prescott name, even Margaret's watchful eyes behind them. They shared a long kiss as fireworks burst above. She thought she'd stepped into a chapter of a fairy tale she never dared to dream before. Have you ever thought that if you loved purely enough, all differences would fade? Amara did, and that was exactly when the story began to turn. After the wedding, Amara began to see more of the Prescott's world. Margaret often invited her to elaborate dinners full of rigid etiquette. Once, Margaret deliberately handed Amara the wine list, asking her to pick a Burgundy to pair with the venison. Amara scanned the French names, hand slightly shaking. Margaret leaned back in her chair, lips curving. Her eyes gleamed with a cruel delight. Finally, Amara pointed to a random choice. Margaret nodded, but her smile deepened, as if she'd just proven something. Amara swallowed hard, a chill creeping through her. That night, she lay awake for hours, wondering, when would she no longer have to prove she deserved to be here, and how many more tests still lay ahead? One late afternoon, Amara sat in a small cafe in the Upper East Side, turning her latte slowly. Across from her, Lena, her college best friend, listened silently. Amara sighed, fatigue etched at the corners of her eyes. Sometimes I feel like a temporary guest, like an actress hired to perform in their live show. I don't know when this role will end. Outside the window, New York streets bustled, yellow cabs in a steady line. Amara forced a small smile, her voice dropping. I love Ethan, truly, but sometimes I wonder if love is enough. Lena clasped her hand, but in Amara's eyes a strange cloud drifted by, quietly, an unease she didn't dare to name. That evening, Amara and Ethan sat side by side on the long sofa, warm yellow light filling the room. He draped an arm over her shoulders, smiling softly. Don't take it so personally, Amara. Mom's just being Mom. Don't be so sensitive. Ethan's voice was gentle, like always. She nodded, forcing a smile. But her eyes wandered past the window. Outside, Manhattan blazed, cars flowing like a sleepless river of light. Amara leaned into Ethan, breathing in his familiar cologne. Her stomach knotted, for reasons she couldn't quite name. She began to wonder what truly lay ahead, and deeper still, whether this love was just part of a bigger plan she'd never been told. That morning, Ethan rolled his suitcase to the door, saying he had to fly to Boston for a contract signing. He kissed Amara lightly on the cheek, promised he'd call that night. Amara went into her office, rummaging through old receipts to send to the tax accountant. The drawer stuck. She tugged hard. A stack of papers tumbled out, scattering across the floor. She bent to pick them up. Amid restaurant bills and plain maintenance fees, her eyes froze. A hotel invoice from Manhattan. The night Ethan had said he was in Boston. Her heart pounded. Hands trembling, she scanned the clear date. No mistaking it. Amara sank onto the hardwood floor, taking a deep breath. Inside her, something crumbled. She knew this was the moment of no return. Amara set the hotel receipt aside and dug deeper into the pile of papers. Her hand brushed against a thin envelope. When she pulled it out, it was a receipt from Tiffany & Company for a diamond necklace worth as much as a car. A sharp pain struck her chest. Ethan had never given her a gift like that. At the very bottom, 2 plane tickets to the Bahamas fell out, landing at her feet. Departure was set for next week. She had never heard Ethan mention this trip. Amara sat there, papers scattered around her. Light streaming through the window fell across her ashen face. She clenched the tickets until they crumpled, tears not yet falling. The luxurious room suddenly felt stifling. Inside her, a silent storm began to form. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a slap in the face to everything she had ever believed. That night, Amara curled up on the sofa. The living room lights were off. Only the cold blue glow of the laptop screen lit her face. She opened Ethan's email, typed in a keyword, Her heart raced wildly. Dozens of messages popped up, titles short and stark. One stood out. Sent to his mother just days ago. Mom was right. I should have done this years ago. Amara's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the laptop. She read it over and over, each word slicing into her. This wasn't just infidelity. This was collusion. A plan Margaret had been nurturing for a long time. Tears rose, hot, but Amara swallowed them down. She took a deep breath, set the laptop on the table and stared straight into the darkness ahead. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid. She only felt certain of what she needed to do next. The next morning, Amara called Carmen. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I need you, right now. Just an hour later, Carmen arrived, still in her sharp gray suit, carrying her briefcase. They sat at the kitchen table, steam curling up from their coffee in the heavy air. Amara pushed the laptop over. Carmen quickly scanned through the emails and receipts, then looked up. Her eyes gleamed with a cold edge Amara had never seen before. Amara, you don't get it. Ethan just signed over his entire life to you. Amara frowned. Carmen gave a small smile, resting her hand on hers. In New York, adultery plus using marital assets to support a mistress? That's a heavy civil case. You're going to take it all back. For the first time, Amara exhaled deeply, like she had just found the way out of a maze. Among the emails Carmen extracted, one left Amara frozen. The subject line was simple, about Amara. It was from Margaret, sent to Ethan at midnight. She's out of our league. Be smart. This isn't just about feelings, it's about legacy. Amara read each word, lips pressing tight. Legacy. A cold word, hinting at bloodlines, reputation, things she had never been counted as part of from the start. Carmen looked at her, voice low. This is more than betrayal. They've been planning to cut you out all along. Amara sat still. Her heart pounded, not out of fear, but because for the first time she knew exactly what her enemies thought. And once you know, the time for them to start fearing you is close. It didn't stop there. Amara hired a private hacker, a small man with thick glasses, working out of a noisy cafe in Manhattan. In just 2 days, he sent back a heavy folder of data. Amara opened file after file. Company statements, internal emails, records of the diversity funds Prescott Innovations boasted about. She frowned. The multi-million-dollar D&I fund had no actual managers, just empty lines on a balance sheet, used to convince government agencies to award them contracts. Amara exhaled sharply, heart racing. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a breach big enough to bring down the entire Prescott empire. What do you think Amara would do now? Forgive, or start planning something much bigger? 2 days later, the hacker sent another file. The subject line was icy. Cayman evidence. Amara opened it, her heart nearly stopping. Dozens of statements from offshore accounts appeared. Massive sums moving between shell companies in the Cayman Islands. This was no longer just Ethan using marital funds to keep a mistress. This was tax evasion, money laundering, enough to destroy both his company and his reputation forever. Amara leaned back in her chair, covering her mouth. A soft laugh escaped, laced with bitterness. So, all of Ethan's speeches about transparency and diversity were just a fragile front. And here she was, the woman they'd always looked down on, now holding the key to break their entire charade. Amara kept digging through an old phone. Suddenly, she found a recording from a gala over a year ago. The sound was clear, the laughter of wealthy women, glasses clinking lightly. Then Margaret's voice rose above the noise. These diversity charades are exhausting, but billion-dollar contracts don't come easy. Amara closed her eyes. When she opened them, her gaze was sharper than steel. The image of Margaret in that black velvet gown flashed back. Head lifted high, smiling smugly under the crystal chandeliers. Now, all the pieces were there. Ethan with his dirty money, Margaret with her velvet-wrapped bigotry. Amara took a deep breath, saved the file, then laid her hand on the thick folder. Her heart pounded, signaling a storm about to hit. Not just their family, but the entire world they had so carefully built. Amara spread all the files across the stone kitchen counter. Papers, emails, receipts, recordings, stacked in neat piles. Carmen sat across from her, eyes blazing like she'd found a gold mine. "Do you even realize what you're holding?" Carmen asked, her voice nearly trembling. Amara looked down at her hands, then gave a small nod. "A divorce I'm sure to win." Carmen leaned forward. Her gaze was cold, resolute. "Not just a divorce, Amara. We're going to blow up his entire company. This is tax fraud, faked diversity funds to secure government contracts, plus blatant racism." Amara bit her lip. Her heart thumped, not from fear, but from seeing for the first time that she held someone else's fate in her hands. "Ethan and his mother underestimated you for 8 years," Carmen said slowly. "Now it's their turn to tremble at your name." Amara sat alone at the dining table, laptop glowing before her. Night wrapped around the city outside the glass, leaving only distant strings of golden lights. Each file was carefully placed into a folder. Ethan's emails to his mother, hotel bills, plane tickets, Tiffany receipts, the recording of Margaret sneering at diversity charades. She named the folder Truth. Her finger hovered on the touchpad. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them again, colder than ever. This wasn't just legal evidence. This was the entire true face of a family that had always looked down on her. From now on, every step they took would no longer be safe, and Amara knew she was ready. Late at night, Amara stood by the bedroom window. The city line slipped through the curtains, painting soft golden streaks across her face. Below, the city still pulsed, still rushed on. Clueless that an empire was about to fall. She folded her arms across her chest, leaned her head lightly against the cool glass. Her mouth curved into a smile, tired but unyielding. Game on. The words were barely above a whisper, meant only for herself, but they carried a resolve so strong the space around her seemed to still. She turned back to the table where her laptop still glowed, the folder Truth clear on the screen. Everything was ready, and in this game, Amara knew, there would be no rules left to protect the Prescotts. The next morning, Ethan came home. He walked through the door with a bouquet of red roses in hand, wearing a broad smile, his eyes intentionally carefree. "For the most beautiful woman in New York," he said, placing the flowers into Amara's hands. She looked at him, eyes wide, glistening as if touched. A slight arch of her brow, a gentle smile in return. They hugged right there in the foyer, looking like any blissful married couple, but inside, Amara was colder than stone. Each squeeze, each beat of Ethan's heart, she noted carefully, calculating which piece to move next. How ironic. He thought he was hiding things from her, while she indulged his little game just to let it stretch a bit longer. Long enough for him to feel secure enough that his fall would be utterly inescapable. That afternoon, Amara's phone rang. The screen lit up with the name, Margaret Prescott. She took a deep breath and answered. On the other end came a syrupy voice, each word dripping thick like honey. "How are you holding up, dear? I know things must be a little tense." Amara leaned back in her chair, eyes staring straight into the garden where the sun was beginning to fade. She let out a soft laugh, carefully laced with a hint of tremor. "I'm okay, Margaret. Really, just trying to adjust." Margaret let out a light laugh, clearly satisfied. "Good girl. Just remember where your place is. Things are always easier that way." The call ended. Amara set the phone on the table, her hands curling into fists. Her nails dug into her skin, leaving red marks. A second later, she released her hands, exhaled slowly. Her eyes lit up with a quiet spark, one Margaret would never see coming. A few days later, Amara sat at her laptop, booking with the Plaza Hotel. She chose the largest hall, hired a full jazz band, ordered top-tier catering. Everything had to be flawless, extravagant, like a gala celebrating victory. Then she wrote out the guest list. Investors, journalists, politicians, the biggest names on Wall Street. Most importantly, she personally called Ryan Crawford, Ethan's direct rival. "Ryan, I'm hosting a party. I would truly love for you to come. There's something you won't want to miss." On the other end, he hesitated, then chuckled. "Amara, if you put it that way, I certainly can't say no." Amara set the phone down, her heart racing. She knew that after that night, not just Ethan, but this entire city would never see her the same again. That evening, Carmen sat across from Amara in a dimly lit wine bar. A glass of red in her hand, her eyes shone under the low lights. "I've sent word to 2 major papers," Carmen said softly, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Bloomfield Times and Manhattan Ledger. They both agreed, promised it would hit the front page." Amara's fingers tightened around her glass, watching the dark liquid swirl. A faint smile touched her lips. "You're sure?" "Trust me," Carmen nodded. "After that night, all of New York will know exactly who Ethan Prescott really is." Amara leaned back in her chair, breathing slowly. A light shiver ran down her spine. She just hadn't expected it all to become so much bigger than the original plan. The night before the party, Amara sat alone on the penthouse balcony. Manhattan sprawled below, a sea of orange-yellow lights trembling in the breeze. Cars streamed along the avenues like endless rivers of stars. In her hands was a thick black leather folder, its corners slightly worn. She stroked it gently, feeling the cool, hard texture under her fingers. Mara leaned back in her chair, lifted her face, and took a deep breath. Not the scent of flowers, not luxurious candles, just the real air. Cool, laced with city dust, completely honest. "Tomorrow," she whispered, eyes closing. For a brief moment, her mouth curved into a smile. No more fear, no more doubt. Tomorrow, everything would change. And Manhattan, the city that once made her feel so small, was about to witness who truly held the power. The party began. The grand hall of the Plaza Hotel came alive with smooth jazz, crystal lights cascading over silk gowns and sleek black tuxedos. Champagne flowed like rivers. Trays of caviar passed from hand to hand. Cameras flashed, capturing smiles and shallow handshakes. In the midst of it all, the doors opened. Margaret and Ethan walked in arm in arm. Margaret wore a deep blue gown, diamonds crowding her wrists, her mouth curved in self-assured delight. Ethan smiled easily, eyes sweeping the room like a man about to watch an amusing play. They believed tonight would be the moment to humiliate Amara, the naive wife who thought she could break the Prescott tradition, but neither of them knew. This stage had been set by Amara, and the lead role had never belonged to Margaret or Ethan. Amara stepped up to the platform at the center of the hall. The lights converged, casting her shadow on the wall. The jazz faded into a tense silence. She held the mic, her voice calm. "Before we raise our glasses, I'd like to share a few family memories." The big screen lit up. A video played. Margaret at a lavish dinner, swirling her wine, smiling smugly. These diversity charades are exhausting, but billion-dollar contracts don't come easy. The room held its breath. Margaret went pale, her hand gripping her clutch until her knuckles whitened. Next, the slide changed quickly. A short email, subject, "About Amara." "Mom was right. I should have done this years ago." Ethan Prescott. Murmurs erupted. Camera flashes exploded. Ethan turned to his mother, face drained of all color. Amara lowered the mic, eyes sweeping the hall. This was no longer a divorce party. This was the funeral of their perfect facade. As soon as the screen went dark, Ryan Crawford stepped out from the crowd. His tuxedo immaculate, eyes razor-sharp. He took the mic, his voice clear and steady. "Sorry to interrupt, but this seems like the perfect moment to announce. This morning, Crawford Group officially signed to acquire all shares of Prescott Innovations." A roar of whispers surged. Margaret grabbed Ethan's arm, her mouth open but no words came out. Ethan stood frozen, lips pressed tight, his whole body seeming to collapse. Ryan turned to Amara, giving her a brief nod. A small gesture of respect, yet enough to sear itself into the memory of everyone watching. In that instant, the entire room seemed to echo only with the pounding hearts of those who had just lost everything. And Amara simply stood there, unblinking, watching the family that once saw her as inferior crumble right at her feet. Camera flashes exploded throughout the hall, each burst like a hammer against the ears. Reporters crowded in, mics thrust forward, their urgent questions flooding the space. Ethan wiped his forehead, sweat trailing down his temple, his suit creased at the shoulder. Margaret clutched the back of a nearby chair, fingers trembling, leaving dents in the velvet. Her eyes were wide, stripped of pride, filled only with terror and disgust at seeing herself so exposed. Amara quietly stepped down from the platform. Her silk gown swept the floor, her gaze cold and calm as if she had finally laid down her last burden. Some guests turned away from her eyes, others dipped their heads in subtle acknowledgement. And just weeks later, the world would see the Prescott Empire officially collapse, all starting from this very night. 6 months later, Amara sat in her new office, high above the Hudson. A walnut desk, laptop glowing, files constantly sliding across. She was now running the fastest-growing design firm in New York. In front of her was a small gift box. Inside, a deep green cactus. Beside it, a white note in familiar handwriting. For your new beginnings. Some of us were made to thrive in the desert. Amara smiled, folding the note. Images of Margaret and Ethan flickered by. Now, just shadows of a proud world they had destroyed themselves. She leaned back in her chair, exhaled softly. All the pain, all the patience had turned into the purest kind of freedom. If you've ever been looked down on because of your skin color or where you come from, comment, "I stand with Amara." You're not alone, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More powerful stories await you ahead.